Okay, this is lesson 9.3, and in this lesson we are going to work on solving a quadratic equation. So again, notice quadratic, right? It has an exponent of 2, okay? But what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you a different way to solve than always factoring, okay? So in the last lesson, we would have you subtract the 81 over and then factor it out, set each factor equal to 0, okay? So what this says, and again, we're going to follow directions, it says solve by taking the square root of each side, give the exact and approximate solution when appropriate. So we're going to talk about that throughout the lesson, about when we expect exact, approximate, and what all that means. Okay? All right, so we're looking at this first lesson today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to solve by taking the square root of each side. Okay, so you're going to do exactly what the directions are telling you to do. So you're going to square root both sides. Okay, now you need to be careful here though. When you square root on this side, the square root and square undo each other, just like addition and subtraction undo each other. So square and square root undo each other. So the only thing you have left on this left-hand side is an x. Now, on the right-hand side, a lot of you will tell me the answer is just going to be 9. Keep in mind that we actually have an answer of plus or negative 9. Okay, so keep in mind that 9 times 9 equals 81, but so does negative 9 times negative 9. And the definition of square root is one of two equal factors. So I have a 9 as an answer, and then I have a negative 9 as an answer, okay? And keep in mind, this guy right here is going to tell you how many answers you should have. So if you have an exponent of 2, you better have 2 answers. If you have an exponent, let's say of 8, then you need 8 different answers. Exponent of 20, 20 answers. So this exponent right here tells you how many answers you should get, okay? All right, moving to the next one. Okay, so on this one, right, again, follow directions. We're going to square root each side. Now, that's going to cancel, so you have m equals, oh, not n, how about m? M equals, now, put the square root of negative 25 in your calculator. And when you do that, you're probably going to be getting some sort of math error or domain error message, okay? And that is because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. Okay, so if you have a negative number here, there's actually no answer. Your answer is no solution. Okay, so keeping in mind, right, to get a negative 25, we would have to take a 5 times a negative 5. You do not have two of the same factors. Therefore, they don't pair up and move out. So in this case, anytime you're trying to square root a negative, you will be writing down no solution. Okay, all right, so now on this guy, we're going to go ahead and square root both sides again. So I'm going to get n equals, now in this case, you're going to have to break down the 120, okay? Because when I type 120 into square root of 120 in my calculator, it doesn't give me a radical, it gives me a decimal, okay? And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So the square root of 120 in decimal form is 10.95, okay? So we would round that to approximately 11. So in this lesson, we're usually going to be rounding to the nearest tenth or 1 decimal place, okay? Now, in the directions, it asks for approximate and exact. So what we just typed right here is about what your answer should be. Exact, we need to go ahead and break down our square root. So like 12 and 10, 2 and 6, 2 and 3, the 10 will go to 2 and 5. So I've got a pair of 2's that pair up and move out. But unfortunately, I don't have anything else that pairs up. So I've got a 3, a 2, and a 5 left. Okay? So when I write this out, I'm going to go ahead real quick and erase this guy right here. There we go. Move that down. So when I do this, I'm going to get n equals, again, it's plus or minus, 2's paired up and moved out. And on the inside, 3 times 2 times 5 is 30. So this would be your exact solution, okay? It's exactly 2 root 30. Now, your approximate solution in this case would be about 11. So n would be close to 11. That's your approximate solution. And those are your answers, okay? So now real quick, kind of zooming out and going back up here to A. So on A, there is no exact and approximate because your answer is a whole number. I mean, it's 9. The only time you're going to have 2 answers is when there's a square root left, okay? So you get exact and approximate when you have a square root sign left. All right, so now on this guy, And this is a little different than all the other ones we've been doing because here it's just been x squared, m squared, n squared. The variable's pretty much been isolated with the exception of the squared. On this guy, your variable's not isolated, but we're going to go ahead and isolate it and just solve it like we'd be solving an equation. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 16. So I'm always going to be isolating that g squared. So I get g squared equals, and I'm just going to leave it as 25/16 for right now. Now you're going to your next step where it's square root both sides, okay? So g equals, and now in this case, this is a review from back in like chapter 1, the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 16 is 4. So your answer here would be plus or minus 5/4. Now guys, this is an exact answer. It's a fraction, that's exact, that's okay. Okay, so there's no approximate here because it's exactly 5/4 or exactly 1.25 if you were doing it in decimal form, but that's exact, okay? Again, if there's not a square root left, then you only have one type of answer. Okay, so again, isolate the variable. Get that m squared by itself. So I'm going to add the 36 over to the other side. Now I'm going to square root both sides, and m will equal plus or minus 6. So the big thing out of this one is just let's make sure we're isolating that variable. Get that variable by itself. Okay. On the next one, it's going to be the same thing here. I'm going to isolate by adding the 46 over. So I get x squared equals 46. Now I'm going to square root both sides. Okay, and when I do that, I'm going to have to break this guy down because there's not an exact answer to the square root of 46. So let's see, 46, 2, and 23. And in this case, 23 and 2 don't go any farther, so there's no pair up and move out. Okay, so the answer will just be x equals plus or minus the square root of 46 because it doesn't break down. Now go ahead and type the square root of 46 in your calculator, and let's get your decimal form. So x will equal plus or minus, it's 6.78. So when we round one decimal, it'll be 6.8. So plus or minus 6.8. So keep in mind, this would be your exact solution, where this is going to be your approximate solution, okay? Again, we are going to the nearest tenth, okay? So make sure you're rounding correctly. Okay, so on this guy, isolate that variable. So I'm going to start by adding the 15x over to the other side. So I'm going to get 3x squared equals 15. I'm going to divide everything by 3, isolating that variable. So x squared equals 5. Now I'm going to square root both sides and get x equals plus or minus 5. Okay? Oh, I forgot my square root. Let's backtrack for a second there. Oh, plus or minus square root of 5. Sorry, guys. And so now plug that in your calculator, and you're going to get plus or minus. It looks like it's going to be 2.2 when I round it to my nearest tenth. Okay, so again, this will be exact, and this will be your approximate solution. Oh, I don't have any idea how I just did that. Okay, H. All right, so again, isolate. So I'm going to subtract the 16 off first. So I'm going to get 4d squared equals, now I subtract 16, I'm going to get a 0 there. I'm going to divide both sides by 4 and get d squared equals 0. And then I'm going to square root both sides and get d equals 0. Now, when we get a 0 here, there is 0 can't hold a positive or a negative. So in this case, there will actually only be one solution, and it will be 0. All right, let's go ahead and flip over to the next page here. Okay, it wouldn't be a good math day if we didn't have at least some shape or word problems to throw at you. All right, so it says model each problem with a quadratic equation. So that means you better have an equation with an exponent of 2 in there. Okay, solve, if necessary, round to the nearest tenth. Now, in the word problems, it'll tell you exact, approximate. So it'll tell you what you need to do, okay? So it says, find the length of a side of a square with an area of 184 meters squared. Okay, so if I'm thinking about this, right, we've got a square. You know me, I like my pictures. Okay, so I know that if I call this side X, I would call this side X because we don't know what the sides are. That's what they're asking us to find. And we know the square is the same on both sides. Now the area here is, what do we say, 184? Okay, so now thinking about your formula, right? Area equals length times width or side squared. So 184 equals x times x. And we know that x times x is x squared. Okay, now you'll square root both sides. Okay, so we'll end up with, now it said exact, so I'm going to go ahead and break this down. Let's see. So I was thinking like 4 right off the bat for some reason. 4 and 46. This will break down to 2 and 2. 2 and 23. So it looks like I'm going to have a pair of 2's move out. And then I'm going to have the 2 and 23 left over. So I've got X. I'm going to put a 2 on the outside and a 46 on the inside. Okay. Now, since the direction said exact only, I'm done. That's exact. Now, in this case, I'm not going to throw a plus or minus out front because I can't have a negative length on my square. So this guy right here would be our answer. And yeah, we should probably go ahead and label. So let's go ahead and label it meters. So 2 root 46 meters would be my side length. Okay, let's go to the next one here. It says find the value of x if the base and the height of a triangle is 4x and we have an area of 200. Okay, so again, I like my, can move that around, that's driving me nuts. There we go. I like my triangle, or I like my pictures. So I've got 4x and 4x, so it's saying the height and the base are the same. And then we know that the area is equal to 200. So again, use your area formula. Area equals 1/2 base times height. So area is 200. 1/2, my base is 4x, and my height is 4x. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean up this side over here, right here. I'm going to go ahead and multiply the 4x and 4x, and we're going to get 16x squared when I put those together. And then I'm going to go ahead and just take half of that 16 and get 8 over here. So I get 8x squared equals 200. Now, the directions told us to write a quadratic equation. This is a quadratic equation. You have an equation with an exponent of 2, okay? All right, so now let's go through, isolate your variable. So I'm going to divide by 8 and get 25 equals x squared. I'm going to square root both sides and get x equals 5. Now, in this case, this is our exact answer, and this is in inches. So x equals 5 inches. Okay. All right, and last problem we're going to look at today. Find the radius of a circle when an area with, it's supposed to be with an area of 121 yards squared. Use 3.14 or pi, that's supposed to say for 4 pi, oh my goodness, and give the approximate solution only, okay? All right, so circle, right? Think about that. We've got a circle. Oh. We do not know what the radius is. We know the area is 121, and we know we're using 3.14 for pi. So again, area, right, would be pi r squared. So my area is 121. Pi, we're going to use 3.14 on this guy. X, because that's my radius, squared. So again, we're going to isolate by dividing by the 3.14. So I'm taking 121 divided by 3.14 and getting 38.5 rounded off equals x. Again, x squared, sorry. And now I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So second square root of 38.5. And I'm ending up with about 6.2. And let's see, this is in yards. So it'll be 6.2 yards will be my radius. Okay. And that concludes these notes.